So to begin, on July 31st, Secretary Rubio announced U.S. sanctions against Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes, who used his position to authorize arbitrary pre-trial detentions and undermine freedom of expression. Moraes abused his authority by engaging in a targeted and politically motivated effort to silence political critics through the issuance of secret orders, compelling online platforms, including U.S. social media companies, to ban individuals for posting protected speech. As Secretary Rubio stated on X, our actions are a warning to those who are trampling on the fundamental rights of their citizens, and judicial robes cannot protect you.
On the sanctions on the Brazilian Supreme Court judge you just mentioned, what is the State Department position to the main reason that led to the sanction announced by the Department of Treasury? What did the U.S. find as the main threat?
Well, look, Moraes is an activist judge that abused his authority by engaging in a targeted and politically motivated effort designed to silence political critics through the issuance of secret orders compelling online platforms, including U.S. social media companies, banning the accounts of individuals for posting protected speech. Moraes further abused his position to authorize unjust pretrial detentions and undermine freedom of expression. The actions taken by Moraes impact U.S. persons and companies, and the United States does not tolerate malign foreign actors who abuse their positions of authority to undermine freedom of expression of American citizens.
I'd like to come back to what you announced. I mean, there was a statement this morning, but you repeated it, to the sanctions against members of the Palestinian Authority and the PLO. Could you specify to us who exactly are sanctioned, the officials that are sanctioned, and at what level? And could you explain to us a little bit the context of this coming really 2 days or a couple of days after the UN conference at the UN on the Palestinian statehood and the push of many allies, US allies, France, UK, Canada, for a Palestinian state?
Well, look, to stress, this is a biannual review that happens twice a year in every single year. And this report refers to the review period that ended in January 2025. So in terms of the timing of this report, this is a biannual report provided to Congress, and that's being provided here. It is the first report being provided under this administration. So in terms of timing, that's the timing, and that's why we're seeing this report now. In terms of specific individuals, outlined in the media note in terms of the policy, one of the many policy options that were available that is being implemented. I don't want to get into specific cases because ultimately, per the report, there is an opportunity for a case-by-case basis consideration for a waiver. And so we saw the media note outlining certain policy implications, the actions that were taken, but ultimately this is a case-by-case, or there is that option for in terms of a visa.
So on that one, specifically, the previous administration engaged with Palestinian Authority to find a solution for the future governance of Gaza. And that administration and Trump administration also said Hamas has no place in Gaza's future, a position that is widely shared by many other countries in the world. How does this action specifically impact Trump administration's ability to engage with PA? Maybe it doesn't impact it at all. Can you help us understand that? And were there any heads up given to Arab states about this action? Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to speculate on what it will look like going forward, but what I can say is that the Biden administration in this biannual review also found them in noncompliance. They chose not to take certain actions. This is the first report of this biannual review that is under this current administration, and we decided to take one of a few actions that were available in terms of once we identified the noncompliance. That is what this indicates. There's nothing further to read beyond this report except for the report finding noncompliance, as well as saying we are taking that action in terms of certain restrictions. But I'm not going to speculate further beyond that.
And the Arab states?
I'm not going to preview private diplomatic discussions.
I wanted to ask you that the Israeli media is reporting that Israel is going to annex part of Gaza and that they have a green light from the United States of America. That's what the government claims, the Israeli government. And that is at a time when the envoy, Steve Witkoff, is meeting with the Israeli government, meeting with Netanyahu, what has been described as a very decisive meeting. Do you have anything to elaborate on this? Can you share with us what is he discussing? Is it going to be, are parts of Gaza going to be annexed?
Well, what I can say is what my colleague Caroline just spoke to. She spoke with the special envoy this morning. She outlined just a few minutes ago what the point of the meetings were, addressing the humanitarian issue, that the situation that we are seeing, addressing next steps for Gaza. I have nothing further to add for her comments, but it is a clear indication that this administration is determined to getting as much aid as possible into Gaza without it being looted by Hamas.
So with Gaza, I wanted to ask, what's the expected outcome from this visit from Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, as well as Ambassador Huckabee? Is this to push both sides to break through this jam and get through these negotiations? And will this potentially upset Israel, who has said that there is no real starvation happening in Gaza?
Well, what my colleague Caroline said, and to reiterate here, it shows that President Trump has a humanitarian heart, that he wants to get as much food into Gaza as possible without it being looted by Hamas. Earlier today, saying the fastest way to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is for Hamas to surrender and release the hostages. They have refused to do so. We've also seen the secretary speak earlier today about how there was a ceasefire in principle with an agreement, and then Hamas came and rejected the deal. That is the lack of good faith we are seeing from Hamas when it comes to these conversations. So ultimately, what this shows is that President Trump wants to get as much aid into Gaza without it being looted by Hamas as possible. That is a commitment we've had, and that's what this is showing.
And just on Ukraine quickly, there's the talk about getting, European allies to pay into this fund in the Treasury Department, and then we would then send the weapons on to Ukraine. Do you have a sense of just how exactly you're going to make sure that these European allies do pay into this fund? And do you have a sense of how many so far have agreed to this?
Well, I'm not going to comment on pending congressional action or refer you to Congress on that, but what I can say is talk about the NATO weapons deal that was talked about by the president. The fact that we have an agreement with NATO in order for them to buy weapons in which they can then send to other countries if they so choose. And I think this is part of an America First foreign policy and the burden sharing that we've seen pushed by President Trump and Secretary Rubio. The idea that we have other countries stepping up that makes stronger alliances, that makes partnerships stronger, while at the same time helping the American people, revitalizing certain industries, increasing the amount of purchases that we're seeing. So we're seeing that impetus from this administration. We're seeing the effort to make the NATO alliance stronger. We're seeing that NATO weapons deal also being implemented. So we're seeing that effort here to put America first. But when we do that, address these challenges in a way that we have our allies and partners also stepping up.
The secretary, in an interview this morning, revealed that the U.S. engaged with, quote, Putin's top people, unquote, early this week, and they didn't pan out. Can you please enlighten us? Travel. We know that Russian ambassador was in the building yesterday. Beyond that, there is no public record of any Russia-U.S. engagement.
Well, I have nothing to read out for you from here.
Were Ukrainians involved as well?
Again, I have nothing to preview from here.
And I know you have heard this from me before, that Kiev is under attack, and last night we had unprecedented attack on civilians. Timing of it is eye-popping. Any reaction?
Well, we have been clear, the president's been clear, and so has the secretary, about how we view recent actions from Russia. We've seen the president discuss the new timeline that he has in place in terms of actions he may take regarding Russia, secondary sanctions or other items. So what we are seeing here, or tariffs, and other items. What we are seeing here, again, is a clear indication and transparency from this administration about how we view these recent actions. The fact that we have tried, in good faith, to approach these discussions to encourage both parties to come to the table. We have seen that happen, which is a credit to the leadership of this administration. But also the fact, as the president said, we need to see action, not words. And so the president's been very clear on that. He's been very consistent, and he's spoken on this very publicly in recent days.
I'd like to ask about U.S.-Iran negotiation. Iranian Foreign Minister Alaguchi told Financial Times that U.S. must agree on compensation before nuclear negotiation, since U.S. attacked Iran's nuclear sites. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, what I can say is that any demands for financial compensation from the United States to the Iranian regime are ridiculous. If the Iranian regime really wanted to save money or alleviate some of the sanctions policy, they would stop taking destabilizing actions. They would stop wasting money on their nuclear program. They would stop sending money to terrorist death squads across the region. They would stop oppressing their own people. So if they really wanted to save money or find a way towards prosperity for their people, they would start taking those actions. So any demands for financial compensation from the United States are ridiculous. But to stress, the United States is ready to talk with Iran. Iran has a short window of opportunity, but the ball is in Iran's court. So we're waiting to see what they do in terms of now it's in their court.
I noted that Sunday is the deadline for 180 days since President Trump's executive order for a report from. Can you give us any kind of an update on where that review stands? or what kind of reforms the U.S. is looking for at the United Nations?
Well, that review is ongoing. While that review is ongoing, we remain a participant in much of the UN system in order to advance our interests. I don't want to get ahead of what the president may end up deciding once that review is complete. But what I can say is that this is part of that effort, again, to put America first. And we're not going to be a part of organizations when it's not in line with our national interests. We're not going to be part of organizations that pursue policies that hamper the United States. What we're going to do is defend our national interests, and we're going to be looking at this in terms of this ongoing review to make sure that our participation in these groups does exactly that.
You said that the PA and the PLO are not in compliance of Act 1989 and of the Middle East Peace Commitment of 2002. Do you believe that Israel is in compliance of these two agreements? And do you believe that building settlements, enlarging settlements, is not in violation of all previous peace commitment that Israel has signed?
Well, what I can say is speak to this report. That's what I can speak to. And again, speaking to this report, again, the Biden administration found the PLO not in compliance and decided not to take any action. And the PLO remains in non-compliance. This is the first report that we have had under this administration. That's why we're seeing this action taken, this biannual report. And it's important that we're vocal about this. We're outlining the reasoning behind it as we have. And it's an important issue here. We're identifying this non-compliance and choosing to take action.
President Trump posted earlier today that the Canadian recognition of a Palestinian state could affect a trade deal between the two countries. So it goes beyond just disagreement with the countries supporting a Palestinian state. It looks like it's actually turning into action. To what extent does the recognition of a Palestinian state by these several countries over the last few days, how is it going to impact the bilateral relations between the U.S. and those countries?
Well, the president's comments speak for themselves, though he also spoke about how, in terms of these recognition, that it is helping Hamas. The secretary also spoke to this. It could be seen as a reward for Hamas in many ways. We actually saw on the day that Hamas rejected, as the secretary described today, rejected the ceasefire deal was the same day that France announced their recognition. So we are seeing, as the president's described, that this could be seen as a reward for Hamas. And in many ways, as the secretary also said, this could hurt the process of peace. Because of these timelines they set there, Hamas has been the one blocking reaching a ceasefire. Hamas has been the one blocking peace. And now we have these timelines set that could actually lead to a reward for Hamas if they continue in this behavior. So that's what we're seeing here. The president and secretary have talked about this. I have nothing further to add to the president's comments in terms of a trade talks with Canada.
I wanted to shift to another conflict in Sudan, the worst humanitarian catastrophe in the world, and the U.S. role there, engagement. A Quad meeting had been expected yesterday with the Saudi, UAE, and Egyptian foreign ministers here in the building. It didn't happen. Wondering if you could tell us about the reasons for the postponement, whether there's a date, perhaps around UNGA, for a replacement meeting, and whether that's a setback at all, that this has had to be postponed.
Well, no date was set in terms of a Quad meeting here, in terms of your first question. And we look forward to bringing the Quad together in the near future. We hope to set that date soon. But in terms of your last question, we continue to coordinate on our collective engagement. We continue to coordinate in terms of pursuing outcomes. That dialogue continues, and we are committed to supporting that dialogue that leads to peace and ends the suffering of the Sudanese people.
Secretary Rubio have a first meeting with the South Korean foreign minister today. What topic will be discussed in this meeting?
So I'm not going to get ahead of that. If I'm correct, this is actually happening right now. So I don't want to get ahead of conversations that are happening currently. What I can say, taking a step back, as I mentioned in my topper, the fact that our alliance with the ROK is the linchpin of peace in the region, and we are seeing a large amount of high engagement between the United States and the ROK. We saw that when the secretary went to Malaysia. We've seen that since then. We see this complete and total trade agreement that the president announced. And so we see all this engagement, and I think this is the latest element of that in terms of conversations between the United States and the ROK.
Are you concerned about the degree of global diplomatic isolation for the US on its entire position relating to the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
I reject that premise that we are isolated. I think we are showing through the fact that we have conversations all the time with our allies and partners, the many agreements that are being signed, the fact that we have many different initiatives that are bearing out here because of President Trump's leadership. We're seeing this across the board in Europe. We're seeing it in the Middle East. We're seeing it in the we're seeing that in the Indo-Pacific. Again and again, agreements being signed, conversations happening because of the leadership of President Trump. And also the fact, as my colleague Caroline talked about, all of the different peace agreements that President Trump has helped broker since he's been in office. So I reject the concept of any sort of isolation here in terms of the United States. I think it's just the opposite, while of course putting America first.
President Donald Trump cut the deadline for a ceasefire deal with Vladimir Putin from 50 days to 10 days, warning of strong sanctions if no action is taken. But at the same time, we see Russia continues to capture new towns and villages almost every day, and this raises doubts about Russia's real intentions. Do you think this move can lead to real peace talks, or is it just a political pressure?
He's been clear in terms of the broad considerations he's making. He's also been clear on the timeline that he has. What I can say in terms of our transparency on how we view Russia's actions, that remains. I discussed them earlier here. The president has been clear on that. The secretary has also been clear, talking about what we've seen, the fact that we need to see actions, not words. And when it comes to this, the president talking about that itself when he was talking about moving the deadline, moving it forward. So ultimately, our hope is that we can get the sides to the table, that they can have conversations towards a ceasefire, that there can be conversations that lead to a long and enduring peace. Our fundamental, our driving principle here is to end the bloodshed. That remains, that continues. That's why we've seen the engagement we have seen. That's why we've seen the actions we have seen. That remains our policy. That remains our effort to try to end this conflict.